Caught in the act. Secret love affair cracked.
Hey everyone. I never thought I'd end up sharing my private life on the internet, but I feel like I'm losing my mind and I have no idea what to do. My name's John, I'm 48 years old, and I've been married to my wife, Karen, for 20 years. We have two wonderful kids, our oldest son, Mike, who's 19 and just started college, and our daughter, Anna, who's 15 and in high school. Our life was calm, stable, and happy, at least, that's what I thought. Everything started to fall apart about 6 months ago. Karen and I had always been pretty open with each other, no secrets, no games. But then she started acting strangely. At first, it was subtle, a few more late nights at work, saying she had urgent meetings with clients, or needing to catch up on reports during weekends. It all seemed harmless, though I noticed she'd become a lot more protective of her phone. It was always by her side, and she seemed almost anxious whenever I glanced in its direction. I brushed it off. I mean, we'd been married for 20 years. We'd been through so much together, raising two kids, buying a house, dealing with job changes and financial stress. She was my rock, and I was hers, right? But the little signs kept adding up. She'd leave the room to take phone calls and come back looking flustered or irritated. She'd suddenly start going out for girls' nights when she never had a big social circle before. When I asked her what was going on, she'd roll her eyes and say, "John, you're being paranoid. I'm just trying to have a life outside of work and home." It wasn't like her. Karen's always been a homebody, someone who preferred movie nights with the kids over going out. It wasn't until one evening, when our son, Mike, came home from college for the weekend, that I realized something was seriously wrong. "Dad, there's something I think you should know," he said, his voice quiet and serious. I looked up from my laptop, surprised. Mike's usually pretty laid back and never gets involved in adult problems. "What is it, buddy?" "I think Mom's seeing someone else," he blurted out, and the room seemed to freeze around me. "What? That's crazy. Why would you think that?" I managed to choke out, though my heart was already pounding. He glanced down at his hands, fidgeting. "I overheard her on the phone last night. She didn't know I was there. She was talking to Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom, my best friend since college. We'd been through everything together, graduation, first jobs, weddings, births of our kids. He was practically family." "What did she say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "She told him she couldn't wait to see him again. She said that she missed him," Mike whispered, his eyes full of confusion and pain. "Dad, I know how that sounds. I know it could mean anything, but it just didn't feel right. It felt wrong." My mouth went dry. "Mike, don't worry about it. I'm sure there's an explanation," I said, trying to reassure him. But inside, a cold knot of dread was forming in my gut. I hadn't seen Tom in weeks. He'd been busy with work, traveling a lot for his job. But why would Karen be talking to him? Why would she be saying things like that? After Mike's confession, I tried to ignore it, tried to act like everything was normal. But it wasn't. Every time Karen's phone rang, I found myself listening more closely. Every time she left the house, I wondered where she was really going. She kept giving me the same vague explanations. "It's just work, John. Why are you being so controlling all of a sudden?" But something in her eyes made me think she was hiding something. One Friday evening, I decided to test her. I told her I'd be out of town for a business trip and wouldn't be back until Sunday. In reality, I stayed at a friend's place across town. I just wanted to see what she'd do. I felt like a terrible husband for even thinking this way, but I couldn't help it. That night, I parked a few blocks away from our house and watched. At around 8 p.m., I saw her leave, dressed up in a way she hadn't done for years. A tight dress, makeup, high heels. My heart sank. This wasn't a business meeting outfit. I followed her at a distance, staying far enough behind that she wouldn't notice me. She drove to a restaurant, one that we'd gone to a few times for special occasions. It wasn't just any restaurant, it was our restaurant, the place where I'd proposed to her 20 years ago. And there he was. Tom. They hugged as soon as she walked in. Not a friendly hug either, a long, intimate embrace that spoke volumes. They sat down, ordered wine, and started talking, smiling, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. It was like they were on a date. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, over and over again. This was real. This was actually happening. I took out my phone and snapped a few photos, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. I didn't even know why I was doing it. Maybe I needed proof. Maybe I just wanted to wake up and realize this was some horrible nightmare. But it wasn't. It was my life falling apart right in front of me. I wanted to storm in there and confront them, but I stopped myself. I needed to be smart. I needed to know how deep this went, how long it had been going on. I needed to think about my kids. I couldn't let my anger destroy everything in one impulsive move. So I waited, watching them from my car like some deranged stalker. They spent 2 hours there, talking, laughing, touching each other in ways that made my skin crawl. When they finally left, I followed them again. This time, they drove to a hotel downtown. A hotel that held a lot of memories for me and Karen. We'd spent anniversaries there, taken weekend getaways. And now she was going there with him. I watched them go inside, my vision blurring with tears of rage and betrayal. How could she do this? How could he do this? Tom, my best friend. We'd shared everything, our hopes, dreams, fears. And now he was sleeping with my wife. I stayed in the car for what felt like hours, staring at the hotel entrance, numb. When I finally drove home, I felt like a ghost, disconnected, lost. My mind was racing, but I couldn't think straight. How was I supposed to confront her? What would I tell the kids? How could I keep my family together when it was already shattered? The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, the photos from last night spread out in front of me. My hands were trembling so badly I had to clench them into fists just to keep them steady. When Karen came downstairs, she looked surprised to see me. "John? You're back early. I thought you weren't coming home until Sunday," she asked, her voice full of fake cheerfulness. "I canceled the trip," I said, my voice thick. "I needed to be here." For this, I gestured to the photos, feeling a sick sense of satisfaction as her face drained of color. She picked up one of the pictures, staring at it like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "John, I can explain." "Don't you dare," I snarled, my voice rising. "Don't you dare lie to me. I saw you. I followed you. I saw you with him." I felt my whole body shaking with rage, and it took every ounce of self-control I had not to scream at her. "John, please, just listen." "How long?" I interrupted, my voice deadly quiet. "How long have you been seeing him?" She hesitated, then looked away. "About a year," she whispered, and my heart shattered into a million pieces. "A year?" I echoed, my voice breaking. "You've been lying to me for a whole year?" "While I was here, taking care of the kids, working my ass off to provide for this family, you were out, what? Sleeping with my best friend?" Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't care. "John, I never meant for it to go this far. It started as just. I don't know. We were both feeling lonely, and lonely. I exploded, standing up so fast that the chair clattered to the floor. "We have a family. A home. And you were lonely? So you decided to throw it all away?" "I'm sorry," she sobbed, but I didn't want to hear it. "I want you out of this house," I said, my voice cold and final. "Pack your things and leave. I don't want to see you again." And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving her crying at the table. This was just the beginning. I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After the confrontation, I felt numb, like I was floating through a fog. Karen moved out that evening. I told her she could stay at her sister's or in a hotel, I didn't care. Just not here. The kids were confused and hurt, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the full truth. I just said, "Mom and I need some time apart," and left it at that. I watched their faces crumble, and a fresh wave of anger washed over me, not just at Karen, but at myself for being unable to protect them from this mess. The next few days were a blur. I barely slept, barely ate. My thoughts kept going back to that night at the restaurant, to the way Karen and Tom had looked at each other. It wasn't just lust. It was something deeper, something I hadn't seen in her eyes when she looked at me for a long time. What had changed? Where did I go wrong? Then, one evening, as I was going through our financial records to prepare for the divorce, I found something odd. Several large withdrawals had been made from our joint account over the past few months. Thousands of dollars gone without a trace, and none of it made sense. We hadn't made any big purchases. The kids' school fees were already paid. There were no vacations or home repairs. I opened her personal account, something I hadn't done in years. And that's when I saw it, transfers to an account I didn't recognize, labeled only with a series of initials and numbers. I grabbed my phone and started searching, cross-referencing the account number. It was linked to a small investment firm. I called the number, pretending to be Karen's assistant, saying I needed to confirm some account details for her. The woman on the other end confirmed that Karen had opened the account almost a year ago and had been steadily depositing money into it. The balance was shocking, nearly $75,000. Where the hell did that money come from? We were comfortable, sure, but we didn't have that kind of extra cash lying around. When I hung up, my mind was racing. It didn't make sense. Why would she be hiding money? Was she planning to leave me for good? But if so, why stay with Tom, who I knew was in a rough financial spot? Or was she funneling this money to him? My head spun with possibilities, each one more damning than the last. I knew I needed help. I couldn't keep unraveling this alone. I called up a private investigator I'd used years ago for a company background check. His name was Dave, ex-police, the kind of guy who could sniff out a lie from a mile away. I need you to look into my wife and, my best friend, I told him, my voice sounding weak even to my own ears. I think there's more going on here than just an affair. Dave didn't ask any questions, just agreed to meet up the next morning. That night, I lay awake in bed, my mind spinning with thoughts of betrayal and deception. What if Karen had been planning this for years? What if there were others before Tom? The thought made me feel sick. A week passed, and every day without an update from Dave felt like torture. Karen called a few times, trying to talk. Each time, I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear her voice, wasn't ready to face the avalanche of emotions that her apologies would bring. I wasn't even sure if I'd ever be ready. Then, one afternoon, Dave called. "John, you're not going to believe what I found," he said, his voice low and serious. "You're right, this isn't just about an affair. It's a hell of a lot bigger." He came over that evening with a thick folder, his face grim. I poured us both a glass of whiskey, my hands trembling as I tried to hold it together. "Karen and Tom aren't just having an affair," he started, laying out photos, bank statements, and email transcripts. "They've been involved in some kind of investment scam. Or, more accurately, Tom's running the scam, and Karen's been funneling the money through various channels." He pointed to a series of documents, financial statements showing transfers between Karen's secret account and a company registered under Tom's name. "They've been using your joint assets as collateral to invest in bogus stocks and shell companies. That's $75,000 in her account? That's just a drop in the bucket." I felt the room start to spin. "So she's helping him steal from us?" Dave nodded. "From what I can tell, Tom's in deep trouble. He's been bleeding money for years, bad investments, gambling debts. When he couldn't keep up with his payments, he started borrowing against other people's money. That's when Karen got involved. I think she saw it as a way to help him get back on his feet, but now they're both in way over their heads." My hands clenched into fists. "What about the money she's taken out of our account? Can I get it back?" "Maybe," Dave said cautiously. "But if you try to pull it now, it could raise red flags. They're moving it around so much that it's hard to track. If Tom senses you're onto them, he could disappear, and you'd be left holding the bag." I stared at the pile of evidence in front of me, my mind reeling. How could Karen have done this? How could she risk everything we'd built, everything we had, for him? It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the sheer audacity, the willingness to gamble with our future for the sake of some toxic love affair. What do I do? I whispered, my voice raw. Dave took a deep breath. There's more, he said, hesitating. I found something else. Something that might make things even more complicated. He handed me another photo, and my breath caught in my throat. It was Karen, sitting at a cafe, talking to a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, well-dressed, with a serious expression. They looked like they were arguing. Who is this? I asked, my voice trembling. That's James. He's a lawyer specializing in corporate law, and he's not just any lawyer. He's been working on a case against Tom's company for months now. And it looks like Karen's been meeting with him behind Tom's back. I felt like my brain was going to explode. Wait, so she's betraying Tom now? Dave shrugged. It's possible. Or she's trying to cut some kind of deal to protect herself. Either way, she's playing both sides, and it's going to blow up in her face soon. You need to decide what you want to do, John. Do you want to confront her? Expose them both? Or, something else? My mind was spinning with possibilities. Karen wasn't just a cheater. She was a liar, a thief, a co-conspirator in a scheme that could ruin us both. And now, it looked like she was planning to betray Tom, too. Was she doing it for me? For the kids? Or was she just trying to save her own skin? I want to confront her, I said, my voice cold and steady. But not yet. I want to know everything. I want to know how deep this goes, who else is involved. And then I'm going to burn it all down. Dave nodded. I'll keep digging. But be careful, John. When people get desperate, they do dangerous things. Over the next few weeks, I kept up the facade of normalcy. I spoke to Karen only when necessary, focusing all my energy on work and the kids. I wanted her to believe that I was still in shock, that I hadn't taken any steps to investigate her or Tom. But behind the scenes, Dave kept feeding me more and more information. It turned out that Karen and Tom's scam was even bigger than we'd thought. They'd roped in other investors, friends, family members, promising huge returns. Tom had forged documents, lied about stock values, and used Karen's credentials to make everything look legitimate. If this blew up, it wouldn't just destroy our family. It would destroy dozens of lives. And then, one evening, I got a call from an unknown number. John, it's James, the lawyer Karen's been meeting with, a voice said on the other end. My heart raced. How the hell did he get my number? I need to talk to you. It's about Karen. She's in serious trouble, John. And if you don't act fast, you're going to lose everything. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice tight with fear and anger. She's not just planning to cut a deal with me, James said quietly. She's planning to take all the money and run. Leave you, leave Tom, leave everything behind. She's setting you both up to take the fall. The room spun around me. What do you mean, run? Where? She's got a ticket booked for Switzerland, he said. One way. Tomorrow night. My mind went blank. Switzerland? One way. Karen was going to abandon us all, me, the kids, everyone. She was going to take the money and disappear? Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because I don't want to see innocent people get hurt, James replied. And because I'm not entirely sure I trust her either. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Karen wasn't just a cheater. She wasn't just a liar. She was a criminal, a con artist, a coward who was planning to abandon her own family to save herself. And she was going to do it tomorrow. I spent the rest of that night planning, my thoughts whirling with 100 different scenarios. I couldn't let Karen just run away. But if I confronted her too soon, she'd bolt. I needed her to think everything was still under control. That I was clueless, that Tom was still wrapped around her finger. I made a few calls, to Dave, to my lawyer, and to the bank. Everything was set. All I needed to do was make sure she went through with her plan, and then spring the trap. The next day, I played my role perfectly. I acted distant but polite, the wounded husband still trying to hold it together. When Karen called to check in on the kids, I kept the conversation short and emotionless. She didn't seem to notice anything was wrong. That evening, I watched from my car as she arrived at our house to say goodbye to the kids. She hugged them tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I love you both so much," she whispered, kissing their foreheads. "Be good for Daddy, okay? I'll see you soon." I wanted to scream at her, to tear her apart for daring to act like she cared. But I stayed silent. I needed her to believe this was a normal goodbye. That she'd be able to leave without a hitch. As soon as she left, I followed her. She drove straight to the airport, just as I expected. I parked a few levels down, my heart hammering in my chest as I watched her enter the terminal. She went through security, checked in her luggage, and headed toward the gate. I stayed far enough behind to keep from being spotted, but close enough to see everything. And then I made the call. 10 minutes later, 2 men in suits approached her at the gate. I watched as their conversation grew heated, as Karen's face went from confusion to panic to horror. She glanced around wildly, like a trapped animal. The men showed her something, badges, I think, and then they took her by the arms and led her away. I sat there, staring at the empty gate, my chest tight with a strange mix of satisfaction and grief. This was it. It was over. Karen was gone. As I watched Karen being led away by the authorities, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with overwhelming grief. I thought this would be the end of everything, that once she was caught, the nightmare would be over. But I was wrong. So terribly wrong. After they took her into custody, I drove home, the weight of what I'd done pressing down on me. I had destroyed her. Not just exposed the affair and the lies, but obliterated her life. She deserved it, I told myself. She'd betrayed me, betrayed the kids. But still, that lingering guilt gnawed at me. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of calls. My lawyer. Dave. Even James, the lawyer Karen had been meeting with. Each voicemail sounded more urgent than the last. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I called Dave back first. He picked up on the first ring. "John, where the hell have you been?" he barked. "We've got a major problem." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. "It's Karen," he said, his voice tense. She's not the one they wanted. The authorities let her go early this morning. She's already back in town." My mind reeled. "What do you mean, they let her go?" "I thought she was the mastermind behind all this." Dave sighed. "That's what we thought too. But it turns out, Karen wasn't planning to run away. She was meeting with the authorities to turn herself in and testify against someone else." I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. "Who?" "Tom," Dave said quietly. "She was the whistleblower. The authorities had been watching Tom for months. Karen was working with them to bring him down." My head spun as I tried to process what he was saying. Karen was the whistleblower? She was trying to expose Tom. But why? It didn't make any sense. The money, the transfers, the secret meetings, all of it pointed to her being involved. How could I have been so wrong? "Are you telling me she wasn't planning to run?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "No, John. She was setting him up." "The meeting at the airport?" "That wasn't to escape, it was to hand over the final piece of evidence she'd gathered on Tom. But now, thanks to your little intervention, they think she's guilty too. They're investigating her, and she's lost her leverage." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "So, what happens now?" Dave hesitated. "Now, she's in a dangerous position. The people Tom was involved with, they're not happy. They know she's a threat, and they'll come after her. She's been trying to protect you and the kids this whole time, John. That's why she didn't tell you anything. She was scared they'd use you against her." I sat down heavily, my mind racing. I'd ruined everything. I'd destroyed the one chance she had to bring Tom down and keep herself safe. And now, she was back in town, alone, vulnerable, and exposed. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice shaky. Dave sighed. She's at your house, John. She showed up there about an hour ago, said she needed to talk to you. My heart skipped a beat. I jumped into my car and sped home, my mind swirling with guilt and confusion. Why hadn't she told me? Why had she let me believe she was guilty? None of it made sense. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw her sitting on the front steps, looking like a ghost of her former self. Her hair was a mess, her eyes red and swollen from crying. I took a deep breath and walked over, my heart pounding. "Karen," I said softly. She looked up at me, and the expression on her face nearly broke me. There was no anger, no bitterness. Just a deep, soul-crushing sadness. "I tried to protect you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I tried to keep you and the kids out of this, but you destroyed everything. Karen, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "Of course, you didn't," she snapped, but then her expression softened. "How could you? I couldn't tell you. Tom's people were watching, listening. If they thought you knew anything, they would have come after you and the kids. I had to keep you in the dark. But now..." I swallowed hard, my throat tight with guilt. Now what? Now, I've lost everything. They know I was planning to expose Tom. They know I'm a threat. And the authorities don't trust me anymore. I'm being watched too, John. I'm a suspect in my own case. She looked away, her shoulders sagging. I'm going to jail, John. And there's nothing I can do to stop it. No, there has to be a way. There isn't, she whispered. Tom's already gone underground. He knows I can't hurt him now. I'm just a loose end to him. I stared at her, my chest aching. I had been so blinded by my own anger, my own pain, that I'd destroyed the one person who was trying to save us all. What can I do? I asked desperately. How can I help? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a strange determination. You have to leave, John. Take the kids and get out of town. Go somewhere safe. Because they're coming. Tom's people will come for me, and if you're here, they'll come for you too. I shook my head. No, I'm not leaving you. We'll figure this out together. We can. John, please, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed your trust. But I swear, everything I did it to protect you. If you stay, you'll die. And I can't have that on my conscience. My heart shattered. I wanted to hold her, to tell her we'd get through this, but I knew she was right. I had to protect the kids. Promise me you'll take care of them, she whispered, reaching out to touch my hand. Promise me you'll give them a good life. Even if I'm not there. Karen. Promise me, John, she insisted, her voice breaking. Please. I swallowed hard, then nodded. I promise. She gave me a sad smile, then stood up slowly. Goodbye, John. Tell the kids I love them. Anne. I'm sorry. For everything. Before I could say another word, she turned and walked away. I watched her get into her car and drive off, my chest aching with a pain I'd never known before. 2 days later, I got a call. It was Dave. John, there's been an incident, he said grimly. What do you mean? Karen's dead, he said bluntly. She was killed in a car accident last night. I felt like the world had collapsed around me. What? How? Police say her brakes failed. But, it was no accident, John. Tom's people got to her. I staggered back, the room spinning around me. No, she can't be gone. Listen, John, Dave said urgently. Before she died, she sent me something. A recording. It's a message for you. I sat down, my hands shaking as I listened to Karen's voice for the last time. John, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it. I know you hate me, and I don't blame you. But please, believe me when I say that I did everything I could to protect you and the kids. I love you. I always have. And I'm so sorry for everything. But there's one more thing you need to know. Tom's not just after money. He's after you. He's always been jealous of you. He wanted to destroy your life, and I tried to stop him. But I failed. I love you, John. Please, keep our kids safe. The line went dead. I sat there, numb, her words echoing in my mind. Tom hadn't just wanted to ruin my marriage. He wanted to ruin me. And now, the woman who had betrayed me, who had tried to save me, was gone. I didn't know what was going to happen next. But I knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And I was going to make sure Tom paid for everything he'd done. No matter what it took.